Hi friends, it's great pleasure to you and welcome to this small video series of total 5 videos. This is an introductory video. The title of this topic is C-type and P-type COVID. Title looks strange and that title generates curiosity. What is this C-type and P-type COVID? This C-type and P-type COVID is nothing but trying to give cellular basis for this COVID, which is missing right now. We are struggling to find out what cell causes it. We are struggling to find out how to expect, anticipate, and prevent and treat various unpredictable complications. And how to individualize care. Because many therapies, many theories are flowing around, which are not able to answer all the modalities of this disease. Disease looks mysterious at present, which is not. Because we are forgetting our past performance. All our healthcare professionals, we are forgetting that these diseases we treat based on cellular basis and pathogenesis. Without knowing the cellular basis and pathogenesis, with half-hearted attempts of trying to treat is going to lead to very mixed results. This is what's happening right now all over the world, that we are struggling to find a uniform protocol or uniform policy to treat these patients. So everybody is trying everything. And we're getting results which are not proportionate to our expectations. So this appears to be a very tall order that will find out cellular basis, pathogenesis, diagnose early, and preventing death. Now this death is very important because though we are projecting our mortality rate to be 2%, 4%, 5%, the truth is different, all of us we know. Once a COVID patient becomes symptomatic and goes to ICU, the mortality is not 2 to 3%. It is definitely in double digits, which is not acceptable in 21st century. So what are we missing? Cytokine storm, then endothelitis. So many theories are floating around, but it is not giving us answer for simple questions. Like why it is common in old age, why it is less in young, why it happens in lower lobe of pneumonia, lungs, why it happens peripherally, why some patients which are absolutely fine, talking, walking, laughing, they collapse. Sometimes they come to us late, we call them late, but they come on time and we lose them. So is there any way to explain it right from cell to tissue to diagnosis to treatment, which in simple language, which is understood by everybody, including paramedical workers? Because our past battles were won as a team, not as academic discussion or journal level. Right from grassroots to premier institutes, everybody tried to unravel the mystery, and then only the battle was won. The viral infections are majorly two types. Fatal ones with high mortality rate and the self-limiting ones with low mortality rate. So these fatal ones like rabies or those with very high mortality like Nipah virus, we accept that there is nothing like asymptomatic rabies or asymptomatic Nipah or something. But second group of these viral infections like dengue, RSV, we know that the mortality was initially high and we successfully brought it down. How we brought it down? It was not easy. Remember, dengue, once upon a time, mortality is very high, last century. It was to the tune of double digits. Now, among symptomatics, were able to treat successfully almost all cases of dengue, except those with multi-organ dysfunction. Dengue mortality has been brought down less than 1%. There is no vaccine for dengue. There is no therapy for dengue. There is no treatment for dengue. There is supportive care. Same thing happened with respiratory syncytial virus, which causes bronchiolitis in young infants. Even the most vulnerable babies from 6 months to 2 years, the prevalence rate was found to be tune of 15%. Lot of babies were admitted every year in winter season, but the mortality is very less. How? Not because of any vaccine, not because of any magic bullet, but because we understood the pathogenesis, we understood cellular basis, and then only we can bring down the mortality. COVID-19 puzzles us. Why it puzzles us? Because we are trying to find the shortcut for this. What is the shortcut? Shortcut is the biggest trap of any healthcare professional is this. This is the shortcut. We are seeing clinical features at face value. We are trying to treat it. Now, without knowing the pathogenesis, without knowing cellular basis, if you try to treat clinical features, most of the time it leads to disasters. Instead of that, clinical features preceded by pathogenesis, which is at present not clear, we'll try to clarify it one by one. And without exactly finding out which cell, which tissue, at what point, in what combination leads to the disease, this particular task is not complete. So in this series of video, first is introduction. In this video, we'll find out all the clinical patterns. Next, we'll find out cellular basis. Next video, we'll find out the pathogenesis. And last is therapeutic implication. This should not be only academic discussion. There should be a simple implications, right from grassroots worker to the top ICU intensivist. Something we should get out of it. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible because we had seen, for example, in dengue. When dengue struck us last century, we knew that this is a new disease presented with edema, swelling, and shock was there. Now, you remember how was the modality of treatment at that time? For shock, we used to give boluses. For bleeding, we used to give platelets. And very soon we came across that we are not on the right track. Clinical feature-based treatment was not helping us. We went for pathogenesis. Pathogenesis came out very clearly. It was nothing but increased capillary permeability. It was poverty in plenty. Body was containing lot of water, but less water in vessels. Vessels were having less water, body was having more water. So why it was happening? Because the capillary permeability was increased, water was coming out of vessel, and it was causing this peculiar complication of edema and shock. What we did, we gave a lot of fluids. Protocols came, flowcharts came, lot of fluids. Many babies improved, many babies did not improve. We came across so many babies who suffered from respiratory distress after fluid boluses. It is happening because of pulmonary edema. We knew that the problem is endothelium. Now this endothelium, not only systemic, but pulmonary vascular endothelium also. So if you give more fluids, this baby will be overloaded so much that the fluid will find its way into lungs. Then the tempering happened. So the fluids became more careful, more objectively controlled, monitored fluid therapy. In attempt of improving circulation, we were actually worsening respiration. Don't forget that what is happening in COVID, opposite is happening. Whenever we try to improve respiration, circulation is going down. We are calling it a septic shock, which is just imagination. There is infection, but it's definitely different from septic shock what we see in bacterial infections. Now this dengue we're able to control because we're able to find out that fluids were to reduce with monitoring of hematocrit. Simple, very easy to follow instruction. And this reduction of fluids did not come from any great world association or something. It was noticed first by periphery healthcare workers, doctors sitting in small towns. They understood that whatever protocol we are doing of fluids is not appropriate. We have to scale it down. And then later on, it was understood by academic circles. So don't underestimate an observer's acumen, and we have to respect that. And we have to get inputs from all these people who are working in this field, and then we'll find out whether we can complete the loop in COVID also. RSV, second example. Clinical feature was tachypnea. These small babies are brought with distress, tachypnea, hypoxia, restlessness. So, so many treatments were tried, steroids, antibiotics, and so on, without any consistent result. We very soon realized that it is nothing but gas trapping of X-ray. Now we are taking it as a very easy, but it was not easy in the beginning. Cellular basis, we found out that it is nothing but viral infection affecting specifically the respiratory bronchioles, trachea, then bronchi, then bronchioles. These bronchioles are very small in these infants, and because of that, very easy to get obstructed. So gas can go inside the alveolus but can't come outside. The alveoli are actually trying to empty, but this bronchiole is narrowing during expiration, leading to gas trapping. And it is a self-limiting disease. So we understood that this baby, we should not have low threshold for ventilation, high threshold for intubation and ventilation. If you try to intubate and ventilate them early in course, disasters happen. Same thing is happening in COVID. If you try to ventilate them early, then we are having very high degree of mortality. Simple humidified gas, simple sedation, simple oxygen therapy, and wait and watch policy actually treated majority of them. Even if these RSV patients go on ventilator, we knew that this I time should be less, expiratory time should be more, so that lung should be allowed to empty. Otherwise, after intubation and ventilation, blood gas used to worsen. So this came only when we came across cellular basis, pathogenesis, clinical features, and last is treatment. In COVID, every week we are coming across new treatment. Plasma therapy, so many antiviral drugs, so many steroids, immunomodulators. So many drugs are coming and going, moving around. And we know that no drug works consistently in all cases of COVID. It is not expected to work. No drug work in dengue, no drug work in RSV, no drug work is going to work in COVID also. Then what to do? First of all, first step, as we saw previously, is clinical features where to try to find out into some patterns. So what are these different patterns we get? So those who are working with COVID, they already understood that COVID is not uniform disease. It presents differently in different people. What are the clinical patterns? First, in this particular video, we'll discuss these 4 clinical patterns of COVID. And these 4 clinical patterns in COVID, we'll first of all find out what is the first. First, every pattern starts with fever. Every pattern starts with fever, but this fever is different in different people. Sometimes it is short duration, sometimes long duration, sometimes it recurs. But this first pattern we are describing, fever is there and fever lasts for long duration. It is a long duration fever. Fever is there. Distress starts early. The patient finds out that the patient is having difficulty in breathing. Now it is a subjective feeling. It is not objective, but it is important. So this difficulty in breathing or distress is usually accompanied with respiratory rate increase, tachypnea. Now this normal respiratory rate usually on adult is 20 or less. If 20 or more respiratory rate is there, we can call it as a something which needs to be observed. So this first pattern presents with fever, mild distress, tachypnea. Next thing comes up is puzzling phenomena that saturation is normal. Saturation is completely normal. Even if distress is progressive or persisting, saturation is normal. It is 92 or above. It's quite surprising because some patients have got hypoxia early, some patients have got distress early. So this particular pattern is normal oxygen saturation. Then what happens? Headache. Now headache can be non-specific. It happens in majority of viral infections, or it can be specific because of specific cause. Hypoxia can lead to headache. Hypercapnia also can lead to headache. In this pattern, this headache is usually associated with confusion. This confusion is usually associated with carbon dioxide buildup. This carbon dioxide buildup is predominant in this particular pattern, not hypoxia. Hypoxia is less, but CO2 buildup is more. That's why this headache is associated with confusion. Now, ongoing or recurring fever. Fever does not come down. completely. There can be occasional 1 or 2 days without fever. But fever duration is predominantly more in this particular pattern. Next is distress keeps on increasing. Now, good point about this pattern is that distress. The patient is having distress. So he or she seeks medical help early. Unless until he is afraid of stigma, otherwise they come to hospital or healthcare workers early. If the healthcare worker sees only saturation, reassures and go home, again he comes back saying that I'm having progressive or persistent distress. Many so-called asymptomatic patients, they report that there is a time of short duration distress. And whenever they check saturation, saturation is completely normal. Some unfortunate patients, they keep on developing progressive and persistent distress. Last is respiratory failure. Usually these patients come to ER or hospital early and they are treated early and results are better. Because since they are having more margin of safety, they keep on deteriorating. Only thing, saturation is normal. Saturation worsens late in course. And their oxygen requirement is relatively short and they start recovering. Some of them, they don't recover, they go on ventilator. When we are thinking about ventilator here, saturation is relatively maintained, but carbon dioxide builds up more. And this particular pattern is quite common. Now we'll go for next pattern. Next pattern is, again, it starts with fever. Now here, there is no distress. In previous pattern, there was distress. Here, there is no distress. Patient is not feeling any distress. Even there is no tachypnea also. Only mild tachypnea. But there is hypoxia early in course. It's very important to depend on saturation monitoring. The hypoxia is very early in course. Then only mild distress sets in. Hypoxia starts worsening. Late presentation to ER. These patients invariably come late to emergency room of any hospital. Even if they are in quarantine or at home, they report late. Now, whenever these patients used to come late, we used to blame them. Why you came late? And they crash. So we realize that they are coming late because they don't feel that they are sick. Because here, carbon dioxide is normal, oxygen is low. Carbon dioxide normal, there is no confusion. They are alert, they are quite active, they are oriented, talking. So these patients, when they come with distress and hypoxia, usually hypoxia is more pronounced than distress. And whenever we have got a knee-jerk reaction of whenever we come across hypoxia or a healthcare worker starts oxygen. Now this oxygen in ER is usually given in uncontrolled, unregulated way. And what happens usually after that is rapid worsening in short time. In fact, in beginning of this pandemic, audit was done for those cases who came and quickly expired, rapidly worsened. And nobody was able to find out why, because they didn't look that ill, except severe hypoxia. Because rapid worsening in short time develops within few hours. Within half an hour to 1 hour, we get a situation of double problem. On one hand, there is a shock. One hand, there is rapidly worsening gas exchange. So he is going for respiratory failure and shock simultaneously. A person who was relatively well but hypoxic with mild distress converts into very moribund patient within half an hour to 1 hour. This is unfortunate event, and then it leads to rapid death. Previously, we thought that patients are coming late. It is patient's mistake. May not be. It may be some gap in our understanding. This whole presentation is for cellular basis of this particular situation, pathogenesis of this situation, why it happens, when it happens, is there any way to prevent it? Now let's go for third pattern. This is a very peculiar pattern. You must have heard this concept of happy hypoxia syndrome. How hypoxia can be happy? Hypoxia can't be happy. Why happy hypoxia syndrome? Happy hypoxia means the patient is unaware that he is hypoxic. Unaware that he is hypoxic. Is there is fever, very short duration, it comes down quickly, myalgia improves, no distress. Hypoxia here also early in course. Partial or no response to oxygen. Now here, this patient is diagnosed to have hypoxia. We give oxygen. Either it doesn't change or it improves slightly but doesn't become normal. So patient with saturation of say 80, 85, goes to almost 87, 88, but doesn't become beyond 90. We're worried, but patient is completely all right. There is no problem at all, no distress, no anxiety. He can complain of occasional headache. Otherwise, he's quite well. We can't call him happy, but he's comfortable. And in this situation, unfortunately, many even doctors also have been trapped. Even there are reports of doctors taking round after initial bout of mild fever and myalgia and all. And during round and all, they are collapsed. Has happened. So we can't blame patient for that because he's not having much of symptomatology other than hypoxia. And hypoxia can be diagnosed only after seeing saturation. Intact sensorium. In past, first, we saw confusion. But in second and third, there is intact sensorium. Now, so intact that they are not admitted. They are in hospital quarantine center or usually at home also. They're doing the normal activity. And here comes the catch. They go for restroom. You must have heard about unfortunate incidences where patients have died in restroom and we didn't know also they died. So it is something we have to explain it scientifically rather than taking it sociologically or politically. A patient, normal patient can get up, he can go to the restroom and just dies there. He's laughing, he's talking on phone for a long time. And he just collapses. This is happy hypoxia syndrome. Now this, once they are found, is shock and unresponsive to treatment. This happy hypoxia syndrome, we have to find out cause, prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible if we go to cellular basis of this P cell and C cell type. Now we'll come to the last pattern. Last pattern is out of all these first three patterns, ultimately patient is admitted. You must have heard about scores of people who are admitted. They are being treated. Initially require oxygen. Next news comes they require HFNC. Next news they come require ventilation. Next news comes they are improving. We are happy. We come to know that actually these oxygen requirements are coming down. Patient is improving. And unfortunately, next step comes up, he starts worsening. Now this initial improvement followed by worsening on respiratory support is very peculiar. And this pattern usually ends up into shock. Previously we used to call it septic shock. How can I call a septic shock? Shock can't happen when patient is improving. Shock should happen when patient is bad. But no, at that time he was not in shock. He went on respiratory support. Respiratory support were weaning, and at that time they go in shock. At that time they go for thromboembolic event. This is another puzzle which we'll try to solve it in next videos. Thromboembolic events, especially those who are old with new terminology as called comorbidities. Old with comorbidities, they go for these thromboembolic events like stroke, myocardial infarction, and worsening respiratory condition. Shock also worsens, respiratory condition also worsens, and one last is renal failure, stroke, and then death. Now, friends, these four patterns we saw. All of us, we know what are these four patterns. But why they happen? Only cytokine storm or only endothelitis can't explain that. They are true, but they are part of a bigger puzzle. And the bigger puzzle is not very big actually. It is very straightforward and very simple to understand. So how to know this? There is no need of doing actually a lot of what we can say brainstorming about it, because the answer was present in front of us right throughout. Where is the answer? First of all, we have to ask about why some peculiar things are happening in COVID. Let us see why. This is the answer. This is the typical picture, CT scan picture of COVID pneumonia. We have to ask very important pertinent questions. If we are able to answer it, then we have unraveled the mystery. What is the question? First of all, why it affects lung in first place? Why lungs are affected? If it has got potential to affect all the organs, why it affects lung first? If it affects lung, why it affects lower lobes first? Lower lobes, why they are involved? Why it is usually bilateral? Why it is usually peripheral? Lung, lower lobe of lung, bilaterality, and peripheral nature. Out of these, peripheral nature is very peculiar. And this peripheral nature will give us a clue. It was hard to believe initially that for pneumonia we are doing CT scan. Nowadays, patients are going from OPD to CT scan. They are going from ER to CT scan. For pneumonia, we used to do X-ray chest. Why CT here? Because in CT, we can see the peripheries more clearly. These pneumonias are missed or underestimated in X-ray, but very objectively delineated in CT chest. So what is the description of this? Is peripheral. What is peripheral means? At center, there is a mediastinum. At center, there are large airways. There are large vessels. As we go peripherally, the tracheobronchial tree is actually dividing, and small alveoli. That doesn't mean that at center there are no alveoli. Central alveoli are there. They are spared. Only peripheries are affected. Central are spared in the beginning. The clue lies here itself. They're peripheral, well delineated, radial spread. They spread radially. Ground glass opacity, GGO. Now this ground glass opacity is quite familiar for newborn. Neonatologist, when he's treating a preterm baby with respiratory distress syndrome, he or she is completely aware of what is the ground glass opacity. Very common. Nobody does CT scan for that. They do X-ray chest for that. What is ground glass? Glass should be transparent. If you put a film on that, it becomes opaque. Something which is in between transparent and opaque is called ground glass. Means glass where beyond the glass, some obvious things we can make out, but we can't see everything. This is called a peculiar situation, ground glass appearance. Means we can make out the airways. We can make out the vascular structures, big one. But rest of thing is actually we can't make out. This is ground glass appearance. So the basis of cellular basis lies here. That the problem is lung, number one, is in lower lobe, is bilateral, is peripheral, which leads to ground glass appearance. It does not affect the vessels in the beginning, does not affect the airways in the beginning. So what it affects, which cell? That if you go in root cause of it, then all this pathogenesis, all these 4 clinical patterns can be very, very easy to explain. So that we'll do in next presentation. So this particular presentation was about just introduction. In next presentation, we'll carry the same thread forward and try to go to cellular cause. We are all aware about ACE2, but beyond that, there is a block. Which cell or which cells are affected, which tissue and why? And can we develop a model by which C-type, P-type, clinical pattern, this we can completely describe. Easy to understand and very important for treatment. Thanks a lot for patient listening. And I hope you'll see the next part of this presentation, which is cellular basis of COVID. Thanks a lot.